Thank you so much for joining us on our first episode of Teen Talks powered by Inertia Teens. Today's episode is with Leila Okhravi. A round of applause. A Swiss designer, small business owner, and lastly, such an amazing and kind person. I'm so happy to be with you today. And if you don't know already, she's a part of Big Sisters mentorship program and my mentor. And nothing could be more better than having you on our first episode. So, could you please tell us a little more about yourself?
So yeah, thank you for having me. My name is Leila, as you said. I am a sewer and a fashion designer. I also am a student at UC Davis in California, and I'm getting a degree in economics. And yeah, like I said, I'm excited to be here.
So, as a suist and designer, was there a time when your creations were influenced by an event or any feelings?
Yeah, I would say there was a few times like that. The one that pops into my mind first is when I think I was about like 14 or 15 years old. I took a trip to Iran, where my family is from. And I hadn't been there in a long time. Like, I think the last time I'd been there before that was when I was like 4 or 5 years old. So I didn't really have much memory of it. And I went there and I learned a lot about, not just my, you know, my, I learned a lot about my culture in the country. You can learn about your culture within, like I was living in the United States. So I learned from my parents about my culture, but seeing it firsthand in the country that I'm from was really eye opening for me. And I was able to also visit a lot of fabric stores in Iran that, I was able to see really cool textile designs that they had. So that did inspire me to continue my sewing work back in the United States and take influence from Iranian culture.
Wow, that's such a lovely story. And I would definitely agree. Cultures and traditions are so rich that they do inspire artists in so many more ways.
Yes,
And
definitely, definitely.
And as owner of Laila Usyus, a business, and doing a bachelor's in economics, were there any times where you felt overburdened or overwhelmed doing it? And if so, then how did you manage to get out of it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think I'm definitely going through one of those periods right now. I just started school back up again and it's all in person. And this is I get my first real year as a college student. So, what I have always tried to do is remember that my sewing is I've made it a priority of mine because it's something that I enjoy to do and I consider it to be self-care. So it should never be something that I feel burdened to do. So if I ever find myself feeling that way, I recognize maybe it's time to, slow it down a little bit, take a break, um, and revisit it at a later time when I'm feeling in a better headspace. So I definitely look at it that way. I also, you know, I when something I do to get out of that headspace is I try to consume more creative media, and not just in sewing, but I watch a Netflix show about a designer, or I look at runway shows online. I just go look at their things and their artwork, and I try to remember why I even started sewing in the first place. And it really does help me get back into the groove of things.
I can really agree. As a writer, I think even for me, it is the same process, and recognizing why I started doing it at the first place and why I love doing it. I think those things can really help us realize where we are and what we want to do with our art. And then during your business journey, were there any times where you feel that you wanted to help someone, and how did you start helping organizations which were fighting for a cause?
Yeah, so I actually started off by doing that. I didn't just want to um, make something to sell, even though that is a great thing to do on its own. I wanted to do something a little bit different, a little bit more. So I tried to connect these two things that I was really passionate about, helping organizations that are supporting great causes and, furthering my artwork and my creativity. So yeah, it started off with the Amazon conservation team. I sold some products that I had made, and I donated a portion of the proceeds to the Amazon conservation team. And I felt really fulfilled because I was able to, like I said, combine these two passions of mine.
Wow, that's so good of you to start doing this. And your story on your website is so inspiring as well. We have seen all the causes that you have helped, and it is so, we are so proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And then I know running a small business could be very tough. And as a young businesswoman, were there times when people judged you by your age or your craft?
Yeah, I would definitely say, it's easy to overlook young business people, especially young business women, right? You think they're not really in it for the long haul. And I mean, what I say to that is, if, to young people that are maybe looking to start a business, if you like what you're doing, if you're genuine about your craft or whatever it is that you are selling, um, you don't need to worry about those people, because the passion will speak for itself. People will see that you are really into what you're doing, and they will want to support passionate people. I know this firsthand. So
Yes, I think that is such a good advice. And continuing on that question, you are such a great mentor at Big Sisters Project, which is providing mentorship to young businesswomen. And I am a part of BSP 2021 mentorship. So could you tell us the story how you felt that you needed to help young businesswomen start their own ventures?
yeah, so I kind of, what I was talking about in the last question you asked. It's really easy to feel like underappreciated, or I guess I can't think of the word, but because you are young, you feel like you can't make a difference, right? And I definitely felt that way for a long time. Who's gonna, want to see my work, let alone buy my work, right? I'm just, one person who sews. There are millions of others, right? So, but I quickly realized that, this is a very unique, great passion of mine that not only, is cool to consume from someone else's end, but also, for me, I see it as self-care. When I'm feeling anxious or stressed or whatever negative emotion, I can go and start to sew something, and I feel 10 times better. I can even just go to the fabric store and feel 10 times better. So, and for me, that was sewing, but for other people, that is a plethora of other things, whether it's writing, drawing, etc. Right? So I really wanted to encourage people to not only just continue in their passions, but maybe try to make it a business and make it a professional venture of theirs. And because it really fulfilled me, and I really wanted to see that in young girls, like other young girls as well.
I think you're doing such a great job at it, and you were my inspiration from the beginning. And I loved everything about BSP program as well. And you all are doing such a great job to inspire young women into doing something that they are passionate about.
I'm glad to hear that. Really glad to hear that.
And then, okay, so first of all, the COVID-19 has made us think of such an uncertain future. Was there any time when COVID-19 made you feel stressed out? And then as we are returning to back to school in persons and colleges as well, is there something that you would like to share with us about how uh, worried you are or how stressing it is to go back to in person, like you had mentioned before?
Yeah. What I would say, like I guess honestly, the most difficult time I've had with COVID is not, you know, not the initial going into lockdown. Obviously, that was tough in the moment, but transitioning back to semi-regular life now, it's quite a shock. Um, I mean, we all haven't lived a semi-normal life for, I guess, what is it now, 18 months? So, it's quite a shock now that especially I'm back in school in person, running around to classes, going back to my apartment, all of these things, like just getting places, making sure I get my work done on time. It's quite overwhelming. But I've decided that right now is not the time to make really big plans or life changes. Just let's try to go minute by minute, hour by hour. That's how I'm kind of helping myself, I guess, cope with the shock of going back to regular life. I'm just going to get the tasks that I need to get done today, just get those done. If I'm feeling particularly overwhelmed, um, I see it as a sign that I need to maybe slow down a little bit and take some time for myself. And I found that it's really helped with dealing with the stresses of, going back to semi-regular life, right?
Yes, I can feel that. And semi regular life is much difficult than full in person or full online. So even I have been feeling the same. And returning back to in person is very tough. I think one step at a time could be the best solution at the moment. And we'll have to wait and get used to it.
Right. Yes.
So, what are some of the positive and negative impacts of pandemic on your shop and your sewing in general? Like, what was your initial reaction to lockdown and COVID-19, and how did it affect you?
Yeah, so one of the big positive things about COVID on my shop and just, I mean, my life in general, because sewing is my life, I guess you could say. I had a lot more free time on my hands to practice my craft, right? I, would finish the tasks I need to get done. And then, I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't see anybody. So why not make something cool, right? That was obviously very nice. But I have to say one of the negatives was, sometimes I would have like a creative block because I wasn't out and about in society, um, gathering that creativity, that inspiration from places, outside. I can always find inspiration online and stuff, but there's just something different about being able to go outside, see your friends, go do something that you love, and be inspired by experiences that you have in person, right? So, you know, I guess now it's kind of the opposite. Now that we're going back into regular life, I have less time to sew, but I am getting a lot more creative inspiration, which is nice. So it's always going to be a little bit of a trade-off, but that's fine. I can just write these ideas I have in my notes and then revisit them at a time, where I have time to do this, right?
Yes, even I get it as a writer that inspiration is there offline, but then online you get a lot more time to put that inspiration into something beautiful. and
Exactly.
and with lockdown and everything, did you feel like a pressure or something to be productive all the time? Like everywhere there was this phase where people were so much into toxic positivity and you need to do something productive in lockdown. Did you face it, and how did you deal with it?
Definitely. I feel like there were a lot of people who felt like, well, this is time off from school or work. I need to be doing something that I can put on my resume. There can't be a year and a half gap on my resume. That's just unacceptable. And I fell into that for a little bit, for sure. What am I doing with this lockdown time, right? But I quickly realized this is lockdown for a global pandemic. Things like this don't happen very regularly. The last one we had to even something similar to the proportion of this was 100 years ago, right? People don't normally live through a pandemic. So if you are feeling overworked, overburdened, stressed about, your life during the pandemic, or, transitioning back to semi-regular life, I feel like my advice would be to remember that this is not a normal time, and it's not normal to be living like this. So if you didn't accomplish, if you didn't find the cure to cancer, if you didn't accomplish the big thing that you had set for yourself, it really is, it's okay. I promise you it's okay, because I bet you there are lots of other people who are feeling the same way. It's much better to keep your mental health in check. If you were able to, get through this pandemic, that is already enough. Great job.
Yes, surviving the pandemic was an achievement in itself. And have you ever heard about survivor's guilt?
Yes, I have.
So, if so, then how has it impacted your life?
Yeah, so I learned that word recently, and it was amazing. It's amazing to learn a word that perfectly describes how you're feeling. I didn't know that phrase existed. So survivor's guilt, for those of you who don't, may not know, is I guess I'll put it into the words that make sense for me, but for everybody it could have a different meaning. For me, I'm live in the United States. I've lived here my entire life, but I have family and friends back in Iran, right? And in the United States, we have a lot of privileges that they do not have. The biggest one right now being access to vaccinations and even medical care, right? So any moment I wanted to, I could make an appointment, which I did, and get my vaccine. And that obviously has helped us get through, I guess, the thick of the pandemic. Hopefully, if the right amount of people get vaccinated. But back in Iran, people who are dying to get vaccinated, they literally are dying to get vaccinated. They would do anything to get it. They just don't have access to it, right? So, we're living in these two completely different worlds. And because of the fact that there is a lack of vaccines in Iran, COVID numbers there are skyrocketing. They are almost higher than they've ever been throughout the entire pandemic. So that right there is survivor's guilt. I am living in this, very privileged society in some senses, where I can get access to medical care and vaccinations and all these things that make my life a lot easier. While I still have the thought that, my heart is still in this other country that, my family is from and my, friends are from, where they just don't have that access, right? They're stuck in this pandemic until they can. So that right there to me is survivor's guilt. And it definitely has impacted my mental health throughout this whole pandemic. I'm not just concerned about COVID numbers here, I'm concerned about COVID numbers there as well.
Yes, I can definitely agree to you. And even I belong to India. And when there was a second wave there, I felt something similar. And it was so uh, disturbing to learn about your people being in a place where they do not have access to basic healthcare, education, or anything. And I think the Google definition of survivor's guilt would be that believing, when a person believes that they have done something wrong by surviving a traumatic or a tragic event when others of their family or community could not, is called survivor's guilt. I think with the second wave, the similar thing happened with me. I could see my people being in such a condition, and I think that was really disturbing, being in, even though being like miles away, but I can really resonate with what you have said.
Yes, definitely.
what would be one of your advices to such people who are going through survivor's guilt?
Right. That's tough. I'm kind of also going through it myself right now. And I would say, um, if you look at the Google definition of survivor's guilt, it says, that you feel guilty for surviving when you know that other things are happening elsewhere that are just out of your control. Unfortunately, this is, sad to hear, but it's the truth. A lot of the things are not in our control. And, you know, we, because these things are out of our control, it's also, we should never feel guilty for surviving, right? That is something fundamentally important. However, what I will say is that, if you ever find yourself feeling this way, channel that frustration and that, negative energy that you are feeling and put it into research. Find ways that you can personally help. It may not be a lot, right? A lot of us don't have a lot of money or resources or whatever it is needed to help. You can't fly there with a batch of vaccines in your hand, right? But there are plenty of resources out there that can help you help them, right? You can donate to different organizations that are helping people get vaccinated there. And besides just, monetary donations, you can send a kind word to your family or friends or whoever you'd like, wherever the tragedy is occurring, right? Send them a card, send them a text, let them know that you're thinking of them. These things doesn't just, I guess, make you feel better, but it will definitely help in some way that, you're reminding these people that we didn't forget about you. We're not, you're still in our minds every day. And we want you to know that.
Yes, I think adding on to that, I would suggest people to educate others about the experiences they are going through or what their people are going through. I think spreading awareness is also an important step. And like I said, in the India whole situation, what we could help is at least by knowing others what is happening there, and then spreading that so that anyone who is privileged enough to help voluntarily or monetarily, they could help. But I think that is something we can do. And one more thing is accepting this thing as, like, if you're going through it, try to accept and absorb that, and then recover from it, because I have seen so many people, they do not realize that this is something and how to deal with it. Now the next question is Teen Talks question of the day, which is, if you could say anything to your younger self about any myth related to mental health, what would you say and why?
That's a good question. I would say that these little things that you're concerning yourself with that, keep you up at night, whatever they were, are just that. Like, right now I'm thinking of all the things that used to bring me stress. I can't even remember what they were. So I would let my younger self know these things that you're, just like burdening yourself over won't matter in a little bit. So try to remember that and try to, take things a little less seriously and just go with the flow. Things will work out the way they are supposed to work out, and they, spoiler alert, they turn out great. So, keep that in mind, the younger self.
Yes, that is such a good advice. And I think every one of us has gone through that phase when we overthink something that wouldn't matter in some time. I think what I would call it as 5-year rule, which is that if something does not, like, if something which I am thinking for more than 5 minutes does not impact me after 5 years, then I think should not spend time thinking about it at the moment.
Right, exactly.
Lastly, would you like to say something to our audience about Inertia teens and your experience with us?
Yeah. So I have had a great experience working with Samina and just Inertia teens in general. I think it's a great platform, especially for young people, as we've ended off this interview, right? To educate themselves on mental health and also learning how to deal with their own mental health, right? We've all lived through a pretty crazy 18 months. So it's important to check back in on yourself. And I think Inertia Teens is a great place and a great platform to learn more about them and how to, check in on yourself.
Yes. Thank you so much for being a part of our episode 1. And you really mean a lot to me and my venture in general. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad I could contribute.
And then, everyone, to our audience, please stay tuned. This was just our first episode. We have a lot more coming up. Thank you so much.